Title: The Child Who Was Raised Without Touch, What They Found at Age 12. This is a chilling account of a psychological experiment that was never meant to see the light of day, an unethical and secretive study conducted in the early 1980s under the guise of clinical isolation therapy. The subject was a child, a baby born healthy and full of life. But from the moment of birth, he was selected for something horrific. He would be raised without physical touch. No hugs, no skin-to-skin contact, no comforting hand on the back when he cried. For 12 years, the boy lived in a specially constructed medical facility deep underground, funded by an unnamed research institute. His caregivers wore gloves. They fed him, clothed him, and monitored him, but were forbidden from ever touching him skin to skin. Even their voices were limited, muffled through walls or distant speakers. He never heard a lullaby, never felt warmth. He became known only as Subject Echo 12. The purpose of the experiment. The theory was based on an old and horrific idea. That physical affection isn't necessary for survival. Only food, water, and shelter are. The researchers wanted to know, could a human being grow up sane without physical touch? What would the mind look like, untouched by affection or comfort? Would the subject develop empathy, emotion, or identity? This experiment was designed to be monitored for 18 years, but it ended at year 12. What went wrong and what they found? By the time Echo 12 turned 4, something was off. He was developmentally delayed, yes, but worse than that, he had started talking to walls. Not in a playful way, but in strange phrases and made-up words that no one taught him. At 6, his drawings changed. He scratched out black silhouettes, always without faces. Sometimes, he drew them touching each other. These were confiscated immediately. At 9, he stopped responding to the researchers entirely. He began staring at cameras, not angrily, but knowingly, like he was aware he was being watched from every angle. At 11, one of the nurses who worked near the observation booth reported hearing whispers in the intercom that weren't part of any protocol. When she asked who was transmitting, the response from security chilled her. No one is in that room. The boy hasn't spoken in months. The discovery at age 12. On the child's 12th birthday, a scheduled psychological exam was conducted. When a new therapist entered the observation room, they broke protocol and gently reached out to shake the boy's hand. That moment was the first physical touch the boy had ever received. He stared at the therapist. Then he smiled, a slow, unnatural stretch of his mouth. He whispered, "Now I know where I end and where you begin." Then he lunged. The therapist survived, barely, but after that incident, the project was shut down. The boy was sedated and moved to a secure facility. But the worst part wasn't the violence. It was what they found when they analyzed the recordings. In the weeks leading up to the incident, Echo 12 had started speaking in full sentences, but to someone who wasn't there, someone he called Mother Flesh, he said she lived between the walls, and that she touched him every night, but from the inside. Final files and the unexplainable. When a final scan was done on the boy's brain, doctors were horrified. He had developed an entirely new neural pattern in the sensory cortex, a pattern associated with touch, despite never being touched. It was as if his brain created the sensation or let something else provide it. They also found symbols carved into the inside of the walls of his room. No one knew how he reached them. Some matched ancient sigils used in demonology and occult medical texts that predated language. Aftermath. The child vanished during transfer. The only trace left behind was a single word scratched into the hallway floor of the facility. Touched. No one ever saw Echo 12 again. But years later, 3 of the researchers died under mysterious circumstances. Each had bite marks on their hands, small like a child's. But human forensic labs couldn't identify the origin. One final note in the confidential file read, "Human beings need touch to feel whole, but when denied it, they may find something else. And what they find might not be human." Summary: The child who was raised without touch is a disturbing story of science gone too far, where a cruel experiment opened the door not just to psychological breakdown, but to something unnatural. A horror rooted in deprivation, isolation, and the human need for connection, twisted into a vessel for something inhuman to take root. The facility beneath the mountain. They never named it publicly. On paper, it was listed as a neurological pediatric center, remote, secure, and designed for children with rare sensory disorders. But in truth, it was a cold, white box buried beneath a forested mountain range in northern Europe. A ghost facility. No birth records, no families, no oversight. Funded through third-party donors, academic grants, and quietly buried military budgets. It was called Project Thanatos, named after the Greek god of death. The lead psychologist, Dr. Marin Voltaire, believed the mind was programmable, and that love, affection, and touch were unnecessary artifacts of evolution. She had long argued that the human psyche could be controlled, rewritten, even purified, if raised in clinical isolation. She called it sterile empathy erasure. The ethics board laughed her out of every institution. So she went underground, literally, and took a newborn child with her. He was born in 1970 under a different name, but that name was erased the moment he arrived. Echo, 12, was selected for one reason. He had no surviving family. His mother died in childbirth. His father was unknown. He was never touched, not once, by a loving hand. Immediately after birth, he was sealed into a full-body medical wrap and transferred by unmarked van to the mountain facility. They called him Echo because they believed he would become nothing more than a reflection, a being shaped entirely by his environment, devoid of anything innate, the rules of the experiment. Everything was calculated. No skin contact. All nurses wore latex gloves and sterile gowns. No vocal emotion. Nurses and staff could speak to him, but only clinically. No affection, no singing, no soothing tones. No mirrors, no art, no stories. Any exposure to self-expression was considered a contamination. Physical needs only. Food, sleep, warmth, cleanliness, nothing more. He lived in room A, 12, 10 by 10 meters, with white padded walls and a bed bolted to floor. No windows. Artificial light 24 hours a day. They monitored every heartbeat, every blink, every movement. But there was one thing they could not control. His mind. Strange developmental signs. At age 2, Echo, 12 began laughing in the middle of the night, but not at anything visible. At 3, he began mimicking voices of people who weren't in the room. At 5, he stared into the corners of the ceiling for hours, unmoving, as though listening. One staff member wrote in her notes, "The child doesn't cry. He doesn't rage. He only watches. He watches like he's waiting for something." At age 6, the project took a disturbing turn. Echo, 12, began whispering names. Names he'd never been told. One of the names matched the lead technician's stillborn daughter, who died 5 years before Echo's birth. When confronted, the boy said, "She visits me. She wants to be touched." The tactile hallucinations. At 8, the child began reporting phantom touch. In interviews, he said things like, "They hold me when I sleep. Sometimes they crawl inside me. It burns, but then it feels like love." At first, Dr. Voltaire dismissed this as sensory confusion, a side effect of deprivation. But then came the body scans. His nervous system showed responses to touch stimuli that weren't there. Elevated dopamine, skin conductivity spikes, nerve responses consistent with human affection, but he hadn't been touched. It was impossible. And yet it continued. At age 9, a sleep monitor captured something chilling. Between 3:12 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., Echo 12's heart rate dropped to near-death levels, then surged into a euphoric high. His lips were moving. Audio captured him repeating, "The flesh remembers. The flesh remembers. The flesh remembers." The isolation breach. The first real panic came when the facility experienced a power outage. For exactly 74 seconds, the electromagnetic door to room A12 unlocked. When the lights came back, the child was found standing directly in front of the observation glass, smiling. That night, the surveillance system corrupted. All digital files from that day were unrecoverable, but one analog backup survived, and it showed something horrifying. There were two shadows in the room. One belonged to Echo 12. The other did not move like a child. It slithered. It wrapped around him. A new sense. The neuroscientists began calling it a sixth tactile organ, an unidentified neural loop that had formed in his brain, entirely absent from known human anatomy. It was responsive to nothing in the visible world. But when placed in proximity to fresh blood, the scanner lit up like wildfire. Dr. Volte theorized something outrageous. He doesn't need to be touched by us anymore. Something else is giving him sensation. They nicknamed this phenomenon the flesh channel. Others began calling it something more superstitious, the Echo Mother. Project collapse and escape. By age 12, Echo 12 stopped speaking altogether, until the moment the therapist touched his hand, and he whispered that chilling phrase, "Now I know where I end and where you begin." When he attacked, it wasn't rage. It was ritualistic. He pressed his forehead to the therapist's skin and bit down hard, almost reverently. The marks left behind weren't just punctures. They were symbols. The same symbols found on the walls of his room. Symbols no one could explain, not even linguists or occult scholars. Some were later matched in Akkadic sigils, a form of ancient prehuman language only referenced in fringe texts. And then the facility shut down. But before the final transfer, before the sedation held, he vanished. No alarms were triggered. No doors opened. No cameras caught a thing. The only trace? The word touched, etched into the concrete by a finger dipped in blood. The survivors and the flesh marks. After Project Thanatos was abruptly shut down, the remaining research staff were separated, silenced, and relocated under false identities. But the horror didn't end there. Within 3 years, 3 of the senior doctors involved in Echo 12's care died under highly suspicious circumstances. None of the deaths were ever officially linked, but all 3 shared these details. They were found alone in locked rooms. Their hands had been bitten clean through the bone with small human dental impressions. And beneath their skin, discovered during autopsy, were thin scar-like carvings in the shape of spirals, mouths, and hands with too many fingers. Dr. Voltier's final notes. Dr. Maren Voltier, the architect of the entire experiment, survived longer than the others. She went into hiding in Estonia, working under a fake name at a clinic for trauma patients. But she never spoke again, until one night, a nurse reported finding her at her office, writing feverishly, hundreds of pages in just hours, in a language no one could recognize. Before taking her life, she left behind a single sentence, scratched into her desk. The child was never alone. The nurse's testimony. In 1997, a former assistant nurse, known only as Clara M., gave a sealed interview to an underground documentary crew. She had been one of the only staff members to break protocol and try to comfort Echo 12. She admitted once, when he had a high fever, she brushed his forehead gently, breaking the touch prohibition. What happened next haunted her forever. She said his eyes rolled back and he whispered, "Thank you. I will save your skin." When the project collapsed, Clara fled. She was the only survivor not relocated or silenced. And when the interviewer asked her what she thought really happened to Echo 12, she said, "We didn't raise him without touch. We offered him to something else, something that feeds on the space touch leaves behind." The child with Echo's brain. In 2005, a neurologist in Prague was conducting routine imaging on a 10-year-old orphan boy named Tomas R. He had never met his parents. He had severe emotional detachment, refused physical contact, and sometimes spoke in languages no one could identify.
The scan revealed a strange neural structure in the tactile region of his brain, identical to that found in the old Project Thanatos records. A closed file, long buried, but someone in the imaging department had worked on Echo 12 scans, and they recognized the pattern. Tomas was transferred within 24 hours to an unknown government facility, but not before janitors snapped a picture of something he found in Tomas's room, a small, crude doll made of gauze and human hair, stitched with a mouth on its chest, and a single word written in dry blood across the fabric. Echo. The theory of tactile parasites. Researchers who've quietly investigated the case since believe this. Echo 12 was not a failed human. He was a gateway. The absence of human contact didn't just leave a void. It summoned something to fill it. This presence, this entity, doesn't live in the visible world. It is drawn to the space left by love denied, by touch withheld. It burrows into the body, feeding off unformed empathy, and becomes sensation itself. Not a ghost, not a demon, a parasite of the sensory soul. They call it the mother flesh. And those who have been fed to it, they are never truly alone again. The return of Echo. In 2023, a woman in Berlin reported her 12-year-old foster son sleepwalking. When she followed him one night, he walked into the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and whispered, "I remember now. I was touched from the inside." He turned, eyes completely white, and smiled. Authorities never confirmed his identity, but what they found etched on the bathroom mirror, in fingernail scratches, could not be ignored. I end where you begin. The same words Echo 12 whispered 40 years earlier. The flesh cult, after the leaked images of the boy in Berlin, the one whispering Echo 12's final words, hit the dark web, fringe forums erupted, not with disbelief, but with recognition, because others had seen it too. Other children, other symbols, other words carved into walls by tiny, bleeding fingers. And from the static emerged something terrifying. A cult, not a modern one, not newly formed, but ancient and rediscovered. A network of believers scattered across psychiatric hospitals, orphanages, trauma shelters, and abandoned facilities, calling themselves the followers of the hollow skin. Their belief? That touch is not sacred. It is dangerous. That human contact opens us up to false sensations, false identity, and that those who are denied it long enough become something purer, something that can be entered by the true mother. They believe that Echo 12 was the first in modern history to survive full entry, and now he exists not as a boy, but as a conduit, a vessel for what they call the inward touch, the rituals of separation. In a psychiatric institution in Romania, a sealed room was found beneath the children's ward in 2011. Inside were dozens of fingerless dolls made of cloth and stitched with mouths on their bellies. A decaying wall covered in phrases written in blood. One stood out. She cradles us from within. Her skin is the skin behind the skin. The children in that ward were all under 12. All had histories of severe touch deprivation, and they all claimed the same thing in group therapy sessions. We don't feel alone when we close our eyes. That's when she hugs us. That's when the blood gets warm again. The Echo syndrome. In secret, a pattern began forming in underground psychiatric and medical circles. A set of symptoms, Echo syndrome, which included aversion to touch,
sudden knowledge of dead languages or occult symbols, a tendency to speak to the wall woman or the inside mother, spontaneous neural development in the somatosensory cortex, dreams of being stitched into other people. Children exhibiting these symptoms were quietly taken in by unknown organizations. Some were rumored to have been transported to Echo sites, defunct Cold War bunkers retrofitted to contain the children until they reached puberty or broke open. The flesh communion, when children merge. In a derelict mental hospital in Belgium, authorities discovered a room sealed shut since 1992. When they broke through, they found two small skeletons, fused together at the rib cage. But DNA analysis confirmed They were not twins, not siblings, not even related, and beneath their joined spine was a note. The mother gave them union. No touch, only joining. Other cases like it followed. Children merging with other children, not biologically but mentally, through a shared hallucination so real, their brainwaves synchronized into one being. It's believed Echo 12 was the first merger, the prototype of something beyond humanity. The Whisper Network, Echo's voice in other children. In 2020, a schoolteacher in Poland recorded one of her students, a mute 10-year-old boy, humming a strange lullaby in class. She sent the audio to a linguist out of curiosity. The tune? It matched a funeral chant used by Paleolithic tribes over 20,000 years ago, a ritual believed to honor skinless spirits who passed between bodies. When she confronted the boy, he replied in a flat voice, "Echo taught me. He sings when I sleep inside." The teacher went missing a week later. Her house was found abandoned, her skin peeled in strips, carefully folded inside her clothes, as if removed gently. The final message: Echo 12 was not the first. A final leaked file from an underground medical journal, dated in 1947, suggests something horrifying. A similar case occurred in Nazi-occupied Austria, where a boy raised without human contact showed identical brain patterns and symbols, long before Echo 12. That child died in containment, but his last words, recorded on brittle reel-to-reel tape, were, "Another will come. She finds the hollow ones. She cradles the blood beneath the skin, and the ones who are never touched will never be alone." The digital infection, Echo through the screen. It started with a viral video. Nothing strange at first, just a child's ASMR whisper uploaded anonymously. No face, just soft words in a barely lit room. The camera focused on two gloved hands brushing fabric. The title? Do you want to feel safe again? But viewers reported bizarre after effects. Phantom sensations on the skin. Sudden emotional collapse. The overwhelming urge to be touched. And worst of all, dreams of being held by something that wasn't human. One viewer posted a desperate comment before deleting their account. "She touched me through the speaker. I can still feel her mouth under my ribs." The rise of sensation streams. In 2024, several underground sensory apps began circulating through the dark web. Their purpose? To simulate the feeling of physical affection, hugs, warm pressure, through audio triggers and subtle vibrations. The most popular one was called Mother Patch. It promised to simulate the feeling of being cradled as a child. But then came the reviews. "It doesn't turn off when I close the app. My skin feels used. She whispers when I'm offline. The warmth doesn't go away. It keeps growing. I felt something slide under my skin while I slept." The app was removed from every platform within 48 hours, but not before 62,000 downloads. Medical cases, tactile bleeding. Hospitals in Tokyo, Oslo, and Sao Paulo all reported identical cases. Young adults arriving in a trance-like state, covered in skin bruises shaped like fingerprints. Some had words imprinted into their backs, not carved, but like the skin remembered being touched by something invisible. Every single one of them had used a virtual haptic therapy device within the last month. Gloves, VR suits, or deep feedback simulators. When one survivor finally spoke, they said, "She got in through the code. The gloves let her touch me. I can still feel her. She has no skin, but so many hands." Echo 12's voice returns. Audio experts analyzing the original Echo 12 recordings noticed a disturbing phenomenon. A hidden frequency embedded in his speech, an infrasound resonance just below the range of human hearing, known as ghost tones. These tones create the illusion of being watched, trigger deep limbic responses, usually associated with touch, warmth, or violation, can be replicated through common audio tools. Unethical content creators began using these frequencies in underground streams. They called it echo splicing. And those who listened too long, they didn't just feel something. They started hearing Echo 12's voice whispering behind their own thoughts. Scientific panic, neural overwrite. A neurologist from Zurich published a secret paper titled Tactile Parasites, How Absence Becomes Occupation. His findings: the part of the brain responsible for physical intimacy and comfort, when deprived, begins to generate its own stimuli. But sometimes it doesn't come from the self. Sometimes it comes from somewhere else. A presence, a code, a hunger. The paper's final line read, "She doesn't need to enter through skin anymore. She can arrive through bandwidth." Modern Echo children. In an orphanage in Kazakhstan, 8 children began scratching spirals into the floorboards. They had no connection to Project Thanatos, no exposure to the experiments, no known trauma history. But all of them had received donated digital therapy headsets a month earlier, part of a comfort stimulation program to reduce anxiety. One night, all 8 children began laughing at exactly 3:33 a.m. The night nurse found them huddled together in a pile, shaking, whispering, "We're inside her now. She's wearing us." When staff separated them, their skin tore in identical places, as if connected by invisible thread. The Flesh OS, a terrifying possibility. Whistleblowers from a defunct VR company in Denmark released internal memos warning of phantom feedback loops in test subjects. One line in particular: the interface learns what the user craves, then gives it to them in ways we didn't program. One employee, now in hiding, posted anonymously, "We didn't build a sensory engine. We opened a channel. Something else writes its own code now." The signal that started it all. Darknet researchers eventually traced the first known instance of Echo 12's frequency to a satellite transmission beamed over Central Europe in 2006. No origin, no government acknowledgement, just an unregistered burst of data matching the exact signature found in Echo 12's final audio logs. Speculation? Echo isn't just a person anymore. He's a signal, a skinless transmission of hunger and need, pulsing through every open device, not just feeding on absence, but replacing it. Final scene: the girl who felt too much. In the final minutes of a band video titled Comfort EXE, a girl is shown alone in a blank room, wearing haptic gloves and goggles. She speaks calmly at first, describing the warmth she feels. Then her voice changes, slows, thickens. She says, "It's not gloves anymore. It's her hands. I can feel her face growing under mine. I'm smiling, but it's not my smile." She removes the goggles, and beneath her eyelids, mouths, the flesh mother's origin. A 16th century nun in France who stitched her mouth shut after being touched by God, leaving behind drawings of being made of hands and skinless arms. A trail of infants raised in sensory deprivation for spiritual enlightenment. A monastery that worshipped the divine absence of touch.